a couple of game threes on the hardwood tonight. Matt, we'll start with you here. We're looking at DFS to begin things. We'll get to the DraftKings Sportsbook. Your absolute must roster guys tonight. Who are they?
So I'm not quite sure if I have one yet, and there's going to be a little bit of uncertainty for me throughout this segment because we don't know for sure that Joel Embiid is going to be out. If he's out, then we really it's a decision between two players at the high end, James Harden, Luka Doncic, and I'll go with Luka. Like both of these guys are going to be really popular, and I think in reality, both of them, despite being expensive, are actually really underpriced. Like Luka is so much better than the other players at the high end that even a bad game for him is mid 50s in fantasy points. And just given like the lack of great options on these playoff slates, I almost think you have to play Luka. The conversation changes a little bit if you're in big tournaments, big GPPs, you want some leverage, all that sort of stuff. But Luka is a cash game lock, and I think even for tournaments, you probably just play him there too.
All right, so Jeff, if we're to assume that Joel Embiid won't play, though, are you going to make the counterpoint for James Harden?
I'm not. And thank you, Matt, for taking by far the best player on the slate and leaving me to talk about someone much worse. I'll go with Jimmy Butler, who has really stepped up his game in the playoffs. Heading into the postseason, I was concerned about how Miami's offense matched up with the rest of the East. They only had two guys averaging over 20 points per game, and both of them were barely clearing 20 in Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero. That being said, their defense has been so dominant, it hasn't really mattered. They've held opponents under 100 points 4 times already through 7 games in the postseason, and Butler has been strong, at least strong enough offensively to carry them on that side of the ball. He's scored 20 or more points in all but 1 games throughout the playoffs, and he's coming off a huge 22-point, 11 assist, and 6 rebound performance in game 2 versus Philly. The Sixers just don't have an answer for him, and I expect that trend to continue tonight.
Well, let's talk a little value then, Jeff. Truthfully, I mean, if I'm looking at it, and I know you guys are the analysts, obviously, but it feels like we've already talked about the best value options. They just happen to be incredibly high priced because they're in great spots, and Luka Doncic and James Harden. So how about someone like Tobias Harris? You could look at Dorian Finney-Smith for a bounce back. Who's got your attention here?
I'm going a little bit lower in the price range. Anytime you can get consistent 20-ish fantasy point production out of a player who's priced under 5K, it's a steal. And that's exactly the case with Maxi Cleba, who comes in at 4,400. You look at Kleba's stat line and nothing really pops out, but he does a little bit of everything, and he's racked up 18 plus TK fantasy points in 3 straight contests. His usage rate has also seen a significant bump in 2 of those contests. The Mavs are looking for help offensively besides Luka Doncic, and Cleba has shown that he can handle some of that burden. There aren't a ton of great value plays on tonight's slate, but he's definitely one of them. And quickly on the other side of that matchup, I also think Jay Crowder is a solid play at 5K. He scored 27 plus DK fantasy points in both games of this series, and he's shooting 60% from 3 over those 2 contests as well. We know what type of role Crowder is going to play. If he's making his shots, the production will be there.
Something Jeff just said, very true. There are not a lot of great value directions to go in here tonight. So which way are you looking?
Yeah, so I guess I'll give like the GPP tournament pivot off of what I guess will kind of be the chalk, which is playing Luka or Harden or both, and then trying to fit in some cheaper guys. And that's just playing Jalen Brunson instead of Luka, and then maybe using some mid-range players. So I don't know that I would necessarily call Brunson a value play. I don't think he's underpriced really, but at $6,400, he's cheap enough that playing him instead of Doncic and hoping for foul trouble, hoping for a blowout, hoping for just a bad game. Luka does have a propensity for technicals. Maybe if they don't play well tonight, there is a chance that he just gets really frustrated. But Brunson also just hasn't played well in the last couple of games. He hasn't played well in this series, and I don't think anyone's going to be using him. Also, he just doesn't really fit in the lineup construction where you need cheaper players to fit around these studs. And I guess we'll see if people actually do want to play James Harden, but he's only 9K. So my hunch is that there's a lot of stars and scrubs lineups. And if you play someone in the mid-range like Brunson, there's a huge amount of leverage to be had there. Maybe Brunson finally gets it back together. He's not playing the Jazz anymore, but I do think that he has a good game in him.
Someone who's not cheap, you could make a case. Devin Booker's another guy, potentially value-wise. But, Matt, let's go to the DraftKings Sportsbook side of things. You have a favorite player prop tonight?
So I don't know if Embiid's going to play, but I'll just tell you what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be staring at this injury update potentially for the entire day. Like I'm just waiting for it. And if Embiid, refresh. It's more like, all the devices got to get refresh everywhere. But basically, if Embiid does play, the points props on all of the Sixers starters are way too high. 21.5 for Harden, 22.5 for Maxi. I think it's 19.5, maybe 18.5 now for Harris. The under on all of those is good if Embiid's in the lineup. So that's where I'm looking. I don't even know that there's one that I would say is my favorite. I think there's insane value on all three of those unders if Embiid ends up starting. I don't really know if I like too many props today if Embiid isn't playing. I think everything's kind of just fair at this point. We kind of know how these series are, assuming that Embiid's not playing. But if he's in, everything changes. So I think that's where the best potential value is. And I'm just you just have to wait to see if they announce something.
Jeff, you want to go back to your guy Kleber?
I do not. I've actually done a complete 180 on this specific prop because for a significant stretch of the regular season, Jimmy Butler looked like the most passive superstar of all time. He would just show up and go through the motions on the offensive side of the ball. Now, every time he steps on the floor, he's locked in. He takes initiative on offense, and that's why I'm confident that he'll go over 34.5 points, rebounds, and assists in Game 3 versus Philly. He's cleared that number pretty comfortably in 4 of his last 5 games and has shown real aggressiveness on the boards, grabbing 9 or more on a regular basis recently, which is well above his season average. As I said before, the Sixers just don't have an answer for Butler, so he should stay hot tonight. Now, obviously, things can change if Embiid is back in the lineup, but as of right now, he's ruled out, so you have to go with what we know right now.
Well, again, what we know on the DraftKings Sportsbook, Jeff, is that both these games are basically a pick'em. So ultimately, who do you like? Is it going to be 3-0 in one or both these series at the end of the night, or are we going to cut a series deficit in half?
I think we'll cut one series deficit in half here. We've seen absolutely nothing to suggest that Philly can win this game without Joel Embiid. DeAndre Jordan's played double-digit minutes in both matchups in this series, and that just can't happen again if the Sixers want to win.
James Harden disagrees.
Yeah, I know Doc Rivers does disagree. So, hey, there's a reason he's coaching the Sixers and I'm not, but definitely questionable decision-making there. James Harden just doesn't look like James Harden right now. It looks like Philly knows they can't win without Embiid, and the Heat also know that. Now Embiid's currently listed out, as we've talked about multiple times here in this segment. He might be able to play. We're still waiting on that final update. But even if he is, it sounds like he's still really banged up. So I think Miami's going to win that one regardless. Now, looking over the Mavs-Suns series, it's definitely tighter. As we know, if there's a game teams steal in a series where they're the worst side, it's typically Game 3 when they're playing in front of their home crowd for the first time. We know we're going to get 30 plus from Luka. It's all about if other players can't step up. I like to think someone will, and that Dallas can make this a somewhat competitive series with a win tonight.
Man, I can't believe Embiid might not play through a fractured orbital. What a baby. Unreal.
I'd be out there with that injury for sure.
You wouldn't see me for a month and a half.
Let's just sign you up 10-day right now.
That's right. All right, which way are these games going to go tonight?
So I think Dallas-Phoenix is a true coin flip. So I really don't have anything compelling to say there. I think Dallas can do it, but I think it'll be a close game. I think that spread's just right. But I actually like Philly in all scenarios. It's just a matter of how much. And then it also is dependent on if Kyle Lowry plays. We don't know that yet either. But I think here's what I expect to happen for the two scenarios. If Embiid gets ruled out, Philly's going to be up to like plus 4.5 or 5 once he's really ruled out, not just listed out. And at that point, I think that's too many points on the Philly side. I don't think the Heat are that great of a team. I think the Sixers obviously have their issues if Embiid's not playing, but Game 3s are the ones where home teams, are going to have a little bit more of a motivational edge. Once it gets to 3-0, assuming Embiid's still out there, I think that's where they kind of give up. But in this game, I do think that they can give it a real shot if Embiid's not playing. And then if Embiid is playing, I think Philly deserves to be like -3 or even -4 in this game. And it would probably be even higher if Embiid were fully healthy. Like that's my assumption with Embiid partially healthy. Because again, I think Philly is better than Miami if both teams were 100%. So Embiid playing at like 70% health, I think that actually makes this a pretty close matchup. You get the home court advantage. And I think Philly wins, like, I don't know if they win comfortably. Nothing's comfortable for them, but I would think they deserve to be 3 or 4 point favorites in the scenario where Joel Embiid is out there. And they're currently 3 or 4 point underdogs. So this is a massive, massive value if Embiid does ultimately get upgraded, because what we saw yesterday is that just because Embiid was listed out, the line went from around pick'em to Heat -3. So it's already priced in that he's not going to play. And if he does wind up playing, it's as if the odds makers aren't expecting it. So we could see this line shift quite a bit.